Hello everyone, and welcome to Mortal Shell 2. It's been a while since I've done a tutorial video like this, but I thought that I would just, make a little introductory video as to what this game is and everything that it has to offer, right? So, with all that being said, Mortal Shell 2 is a game that just came out just recently, maybe a week or so ago. It was created by an American indie group named Cold Symmetry. Previously, they had made the first Mortal Shell, and that game was kind of received to mixed reviews. Some people really liked it, some people really didn't, including myself. But instead of just abandoning ship on the franchise and on the IP, they decided to go back in the lab, find out what worked, remove what didn't, and after lots of hard work and development, a few years later, they came back and they presented Mortal Shell 2. It's a very brutal type of game. Brutal in terms of difficulty. Brutal in terms of the world space and the things that you have going on. There's lots of blood. There's dismemberment. There's all kinds of, it's a very brutal type of game. Very metal if you're into that kind of thing, right? And it works, right? It's very unapologetic in what it is that it's trying to do, right? So there are a couple of big things I think that are, well, first let's just kind of get into the general systems, right? Like any other Souls-like game, you have certain things, right? You have your dodge, right? Oh, well. You have your death by gravity, since this had to happen during my recording. You have your death by gravity. That might happen to you at some point. You have things, like your block and your parry and your currency, which in this game is called Gloom. You have, let's see, so like I can parry like this, like I have like a perfect guard here, but then I also have another way that I can actually do like an actual parry itself. That's more high risk, high reward. But I would say that the two main things that are unique about this game is that there is no stamina bar. If you're looking at that orange bar that's above my health bar, that is obviously not the stamina bar. That is the resolve bar, and it operates closer to what maybe whatever you want to call it, FP, MP, mana, whatever you want to call it. It operates similar to something like that more than a stamina bar. In this game, you can do any action as long as you want to do any action, and you don't have to worry about managing your stamina. That part of the mental stack in the game is gone, right? It doesn't necessarily make the game easier. It just makes it, I guess, it just removes that part of the experience out of your mental stack. So now you don't have to worry about, well, I got to get these 2 shots in, and then I have enough stamina to maybe dodge back once. Then I can sit back in the cut. Like the general gameplay loop that you would expect in something like a Dark Souls or an Elden Ring or a Bloodborne or any of that kind of stuff, that gameplay loop is still there. The things that you would worry about are still there, but it's all without a stamina bar, right? And then the other thing that is pretty unique to this game is that you have your beacons, which are like your bonfire in this game. And when you first come upon a beacon, you will rest at it like you normally do a bonfire. But then if you look at the top here, it says enter beacon. At first, this will say cleanse beacon. Because like I said, the overall goal of the game is to gather as much ovum as you can to present to the Undermother. And by cleansing beacons, you are able to gain some of that ova back. Sometimes it's ova, sometimes it's just a cool item or a cool tar stone or money or something of that effect. It might be, so they're like dungeons, basically. Let's go inside this one real quick. They're just like dungeons, basically. You'll go down into the thing here, and sometimes there'll be something sitting in the middle of the room here. Sometimes there'll be things in the corners of the room here that might try to sneak out and attack you, surprise you. It might just be resources that are there, and then you'll go down this lift, and Once you go down the lift, the actual expedition into the dungeon begins. Now, once you go through and you know, do what you have to do, you know, you got, okay, well, we got somebody hitting us. So let's take care of him. It really depends on how, on what the specific, I got it back up apparently. And this is also a thing you have to worry about. Get off me. Sometimes there's loads, most of the time there's loads of mobs and stuff down here. So it's always good to not get caught by the mobs, because they will gank you. Sometimes you'll get traps, like these pots here. So you have to watch for that. But yeah, you know, you'll just go through the dungeon as you need to, and eventually you'll come upon this end of dungeon chest here, right? Once you do that, that's it. The beacon's cleansed. You'll see this little thing right here, this little glowing thing right here, and you'll collect whatever is there. You'll return to the beginning of the dungeon, and you know, you'll exit out, and then you'll move on and you'll go to the next one, right? So that is pretty unique to this game, because almost every beacon in the game has something like that. They have, most beacons, I will say about 98% of beacons in the game have to be cleansed in order to basically receive whatever's inside of them. There's usually a dungeon inside of every one of these, basically. Some of them are just there solely as checkpoints, but for the most part, you'll be resting at beacons, entering beacons, cleansing beacons, and then going upon your merry way to continue your exploration and stuff, right? So, in order for me to show you this next part, I have to go back to the Marrow Keep, which is the Firelink Shrine of this game. The third and probably final biggest thing in this game that is unique about this game is the shell system. This guy that you see here is not who I am as the player character, right? This is the shell of a person that I have inhabited. When you first start, you will come through that door, and this cutscene will play. Let me skip that real quick. You'll come through that door, and yeah, all this stuff is going on. I just got to New Game Plus, that's why all this is popping up. But you'll come through that door, you know, up these steps, and you'll meet this lady. This is Zarel. She is an important part of kind of leveling your shell, and she is also the one that allows you to upgrade your shell, basically. So when you meet her, you'll pick a shell. At first you might not have a shell, right? You have to go find one. So you'll literally just kind of be like naked, if that's kind of the best term I can use for it. You'll be in like your base form without having inhabited a shell, right? And then you'll eventually go out into the world and you'll find new shells and stuff like that. And once you finally find shells, they will be laid upon these slabs here. Now let's just make this clear. Every single one of these people are dead. They have died for a specific reason that you will find out as you collect them and upgrade them in order to find out their stories, right? So for the video's sake, we'll just assume that I went out and I found Eredrim, right? So now I found Eredrim and I go to Zarel, and there are two options here that I have. The first option is shell bonding. Shell bonding is what you need to do to basically level the shell in and of themselves. They have like a base level or a bond that you share with the shell. You increase this bond by spending glimpses. Glimpses are found normally from defeating bosses and from cleansing beacons. And as you find enough of them, you're able to increase the bond level. Now, by increasing the bond level, you get a few things. You get, obviously, a better bond tier, which holds its own value in and of itself. You get additional shell health on revive. In this game, when you die while you're inhabiting a shell, you don't immediately lose, right? You're just kind of ejected from the shell, and you go back to your base form of like who you really are as the Harbinger. But by physically attacking your enemy, I don't think it works for ranged attacks, but by physically attacking with your melee weapon enemies, you're able to build a meter back up to 100%. Once you reach 100%, you can re-inhabit your shell. Now, if you die after you have re-inhabited your shell, you are then again ejected from the shell, but trying to re-inhabit it again by way of melee combat becomes harder. It takes longer or more hits, I guess you could say, to be able to get back into the shell, right? So on revive, from being able to re-inhabit the shell, the higher the bond level is, the more health you'll get for the shell on revive. I think initially it starts at like 20%, then it might go up to like 25, 30, and then eventually 50%. You'll come back at half health. Shell revive efficiency is what I was mentioning earlier. Every time you die while inhabiting a shell, you're kicked out. But by use of melee combat, you're able to build a meter back up in order to re-inhabit the shell. On subsequent deaths, after you have re-inhabited the shell, it takes more hits. It gets harder and harder and harder to build that meter back up in order to re-inhabit the shell again. Shell revive efficiency is exactly that. It makes it easier to re-inhabit this particular shell. So it takes less hits on subsequent deaths to be able to come back and re-inhabit the shell. And then you also gain the memories of the shell. These memories are it's a little backstory on who this particular person was, what their goal was, what were the chain of events that ended up happening that ultimately ended up leading to this particular person's death, and why, and giving you so that you kind of understand why you're able to inhabit this shell. This is everything that happened to them before, a good portion of what happened to them before they died, basically. And so in this game, in one new game cycle, you're able to build up about 3 of these fully. Get like a bond level +4. You're able to do about 3 times through as many glimpses as you're able to do. Now that obviously requires you to be a very good explorer, inquisitive by nature, going and checking every nook and cranny on the map to make sure that you're able to find these. When you find the different beacons and stuff, you're cleansing them so that you can get glimpses. You're going through, you're beating bosses, all that different kinds of stuff, right? But yeah, that's pretty much the idea behind shells. They are the base foundation that you use to start a build. And they work in tandem. Oh wait, I didn't even talk about that. They work in tandem with these abilities. Now, actually, I can talk about that on leveling. So then, once you have gotten your shell and you like their kit, each shell has a different kit, different abilities and stuff that are intrinsic to them, that are unique to them. Then you go and you can level up. In this game, Mortal Shell has decided that instead of the traditional attribute leveling that you would normally do, it is a strict character level. So, on the left here, you can see your character level and what you get when you increase it, right? You get more health, more base health, I should say, for when you're out of your shell. You get more shell health for when you're in your shell. You do more base damage, outside of having any kind of weapons or infusions on those weapons or skills or anything like that. There's more ability damage that the shell itself can do. So for, in the case of Eredrim, his shoulder rust does more damage, and his other skill where he kind of bangs 2 swords together and there's like a shockwave that happens, that gets more base damage by itself. you increase your base critical damage and you get more shell points. Shell points are what you use to upgrade the shell, a skill tree, if you will, of the shell itself to buff certain aspects of the shell, right? So like, you can do things like make the shoulder bash charge 30% faster and make it cost less. You get things like certain kinds of stacks that are intrinsic to the shell. You get things like elemental mitigation, things like this. You know, he can be completely immune to frost at one point if you build this up. Ways to restore resolved. You get damage reduction per stack of whatever it might be. For him and Slaughterer, you get different abilities and stuff like that. Ways to do more break damage, ways to inflict status ailments, all that different kinds of stuff, right? And these take skill points, basically. You get skill points by leveling, and you get them kind of slower, I should say, slowly, I should say. But the more you level, the more you're able to get skill points by leveling. You get more as you level higher and higher and higher, basically. But once you have done that, then it's time to get into basically what is the meat and potatoes of this game, and that is the build system. There is a solid amount of build variety in this game, and while there definitely are some restrictions that are put in place, the build variety overall is in depth enough that you can have fun with multiple builds in the same playthrough, just like I did. I tried out every weapon, sidearm, and seal in the game my first playthrough, and I found that it was very interesting to be experimental like that, and to engage in that kind of experimentation, to seeing what works and what doesn't work, what feels cool, what doesn't, that kind of thing. This game is pretty good for that. So to start with our build, we have to talk about items. In this game, there are a bunch of these different items called PP items. They're basically permanent items that you will find around the map. And when you find them around the map, you can equip them. You can equip them in either the active slot or the passive slot. Active on the left, passive on the right. When you first find an item, you have no familiarity with it. Familiarity is a mechanic that basically levels as you collect more of a specific item, basically. But each item has two different effects that can be put upon you depending on which slot that it's in. If it's at the top of the tier, it's in the active slot. If it's in the bottom part of the tier, it's in the passive slot. So, for instance, right now in my active slot, I have the Greaser Remnant. What this means is that I can actively use this. There's a button press that I can do, usually down on the D-pad, that I can press in order to summon this Grisha to fight by my side. It's like this big furry beast thing with like claws for hands, basically. I can use this thing twice per time I rest at a beacon, basically. And so anytime you equip anything in the active slot, you're able to use it, and you are only given the effect at the top of the tier, basically, that top effect. When you have something in the passive slot, this is something that just, as it says, it's passive. It just happens naturally. So it's just an added buff that is on your character at all times. In this case, I have the Common Moonshine on, which means I get damage reduction just passively. But as you go along and you collect more and more of these specific items, you start to gain more familiarity with it. As you gain familiarity, you unlock the tiers. And when you have gained max familiarity with it, you gain the final tier and are able to gain whatever benefits you get from that final tier. So it progresses in a tier system. You start with the first one, you gain a little bit more familiarity with it, you get the second tier, then you gain some more of the specific item, you get max familiarity basically with it, and you unlock the last tier. And whichever slot it's in determines which of the effects that you get on your person. So once you have figured out which of those that you want, because it could be stuff like this where you get damage reduction, or you can increase your resolve, you can deal with certain elemental affinities and have mitigation for certain elements and stuff like that. You get weird ones like this where if it's an active, it'll turn you into a sheep, or if it's in the passive, you can reduce the max health of enemies by 1%. It really just kind of depends on what you want to do. But after you have decided which one of these that you want to equip, which of these two I should say that you want to equip, then you can go on to your weapon. This is the bread and butter basically of your build. This is how you will melee attack, right? There are 8 weapons in total in this game, and each of them have their own strengths, their own weaknesses. They each are viable to the overall experience. You can beat the game with every single one of these weapons by themselves. And these are also scattered across the map. Yeah, these are also just scattered across the map, and they're usually hidden inside of dungeons. So it really makes it worthwhile to go and explore. Go and explore the world, basically, so that you can find all these cool weapons and stuff. A few of them are kind of like right next to each other, so some of them are easier to find than others. But even if you don't want to just scour the map endlessly to try to go figure out where they are, there's a merchant in the Marrow Keep that you can go and pay money to, and he will sell you maps that will give you a kind of a roundabout area of where this weapon might be, kind of thing, and you can go search inside of that area to try to find the weapon and obtain it, basically. So there's 8 weapons, and there's there's quick ones, there's ones that are of a medium speed, there's ones that are of a very slow speed. It really just depends on what it is you want to do. You also have your sidearm. Your sidearm is your ranged option. And these kind of vary from things like a ballistazooka, which is basically like, exactly how it says. It's a giant ass ballista that pierces through enemies and stuff like that. You also have, standard crossbows and stuff, not quite as powerful as the ballista, but able to be used in a more DPS oriented way. You also have things like guns. This is a whole ass shotgun. This is a whole ass catapult that launches axes at people. This is basically a submachine gun, if you want to put it that way. This is like a minigun. This is like a little skeleton baby inside of a cage that's, when you activate it, it releases like this burst fire type of attack towards the enemy. And then the classic loot that came from the first game, right? So this is basically like your ranged option, and you get to do whatever it is that you get to build this according to how you set your tar stones, which we'll get to here in a second. But then you also have your seal. There are 4 seals in the game, and each of them do something basically different. Untarnished seal, this just gives you access to guard. This allows you to guard. If you time the guard properly, you get a perfect guard, which allows you to do break damage to an enemy. Then you have Vatra Seal, which brings back the famed harden mechanic from the first Mortal Cell. You harden your entire body in animation, and if you perfectly do this, that also deals break damage. It's basically another way to block. Then you will have the Infinite Seal, which is just a straight up parry. Think like the parrying dagger from the Dark Souls. It's a high risk, high reward mechanic. If you get the parry off, then you're rewarded with much more break damage done to the enemy. But if you whiff, there's a lot of recovery time, and you're probably going to end up taking a few shots. You might even die from it. So it's a very high risk, high reward type of seal that requires a lot of practice in order to be able to use effectively. And then you have the Slayer Seal. This is just a fun little seal for people who just want to chill out with the game and just basically be a god. Basically, for cats who want that crazy power fantasy type of thing, that's what the Slayer Seal is for. I will say though that if you equip this, it completely disables your save file to gain achievements. So either you're going to commit to this from the jump and create another save file where you're going to go for achievements, or you're going to get all the achievements that you care to get first and then equip the Slayer Seal. But that being said, you just get a whole lot of mileage out of basically destroying enemies in any way that you see fit. It's a really cool little seal that takes the seriousness of the game down a little bit. It's a really chill, relaxed type of thing. But after you have equipped your seal and your sidearm and your weapon and the 2 PP items that you decided that you wanted to use, then you move over to Tarstones. Tarstones are basically like the talismans of the game, basically, a la Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, that kind of thing, right? And in this game, there are 4 types of Tarstones. You have your support Tarstones, you have combat Tarstones, you have infusions, and you have abilities. Support Tarstones are Tarstones that you can put on your character, and they are passive effects that happen no matter if you're in a shell or out of a shell, or no matter if you're using Aerogem or Proxima or any of the other shells that you can obtain, basically. These serve as kind of a base foundation of passive effects that you just want to happen, whether that's having your melee attacks do more critical damage, or have a higher critical chance, or having your ranged attacks do more critical chance, or being able to gain more gloom from foes, or having riposte damage do more, all that different kinds of stuff. These are absolute. You put them on and you forget about them. You get the added effect, that's it. Combat determines what effects might happen once you actually attack with a given weapon, right? So for instance, the Thief Stone here gives you grants you warp, which slightly increases your weapon's attack speed. Then melee attacks might also inflict perforation stacks on enemies, which grants bonus damage to enemies when you attack them with your sidearm. But the thing about these though is that you get 1 for your melee attack and you get 1 for your ranged attack. So you want to make sure that you have it fitted out for well, I guess that's pretty much it, right? Like you get 1 for your melee attack, you get 1 for your ranged attack. And there's all different kinds of effects and stuff that you can get from them. Let's see. And then you have infusions. Infusions is the same idea. You get 1 infusion for your melee attack. You get 1 infusion for your ranged attack. And then also the same thing for abilities here. These are special abilities that you can only use if the Tarstone is equipped. 1 for your melee attack, 1 for your ranged attack. You'll notice the ring around the top part of the icon, indicating which side it's going to be on. If it's on the left, it's melee. If it's on the right, it's ranged, right? And then you have all the uncollected ones that basically giving you a number, basically, of how many Tarstones are still out there that you have not collected. But once you have figured all that out, then you'll start to notice that not everything is compatible with everything. Take, for instance, the Serpent Stone. I can't infuse this Great Martyr's Blade with the Serpent Stone, which infuses the weapon with poison. I can't use this with this weapon. So that's where some of the limitations start to come in. Me personally, this is the thing that I hate the most about this game. I don't hate this game in any fashion whatsoever, but if we had to pick one thing that I severely dislike, it's this. I don't understand the idea of limiting build variety behind a single player game. There's no multiplayer in this game, co-op or otherwise. So limiting the build variety like this doesn't make sense to me, because you gave us the Slayer Seal, right? This literal seal that literally turns you into a god and gives you all kinds of insane passive benefits, allows you to regenerate health and regenerate resolve on the fly type of stuff, right? Why would you give us that, but then give us limitations on what we can equip with any given weapon on any given build? I don't like that at all. But that all being said, there are limitations. So some things you will not be able to use. In fact, with this particular blade, there are a lot of things that I can't use with it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have like 7. Yeah, I have like 7 tar stones here that I can't use with this, and 2 that I can. So it's lightning or frost. Those are my options. So you have to take into account what you can use for your build and what you cannot use for your build. Because not everything is viable. But you do this on both sides, right? You select your, or on all sides, I should say. You select your support, which are all situated at the bottom. You get 4. Then on the left, that's all your melee stuff, and then on the right, that's all your ranged stuff. And for each melee and ranged, you get a combat one, an infusion, and an ability tar stone that you can put on it, but it has to be compatible with the weapon. And so yeah, after that, you just kind of build around it, right? You build what you want to build, and there are a lot of builds in here. Like, even with the limitations being what they are, there was enough build variety in the game where I still had fun but experimenting with all the different weapons and all the different sidearms and the seals and stuff. I still had fun doing that. I just don't like that there actually are limitations. I would have preferred it if they would have taken an approach similar to Elden Ring's talismans, where even though you could use talismans, well, first of all, you could use talismans on anything, right? Like, talismans were effectively the support, which is kind of what's here. But there aren't a lot of supports here, right? There's not a lot of options here. But then when you wanted to go do something like use a spell to buff your character, like your weapon or something like that, that's kind of where infusions come into place. And it's like, dude, I can only use these 2. I would have preferred if you would just allowed me to use all of these, and then if it was like a specific special weapon, maybe that weapon could only be infused with a certain kind or something like that, or couldn't be infused at all for that matter, right? But the thing about this game, because there are only 8 weapons, like 8 melee weapons and 8 ranged weapons, all of those weapons are considered like unique weapons, right? Like, those are like your legendary items type of thing. So because of that, this is the system that they've worked out, basically. But I digress. There's, like I said before, there's still enough build variety in the game to have fun. There is definitely, even with these limitations, definitely some broken stuff in this game that makes even regular combat against enemies and bosses super easy, right? But after you've done all that and you figured it out what exactly you want to be, you got your shell, you got your weapon, sidearm, all that kind of stuff, then we go to the map. This is the map of the game, the entire world space, this entire circle. You start here, but you won't have all these dungeons and stuff unlocked and all these different beacons and stuff. So let's see, let's turn all that off. Okay, so as it stands, these pointy things are all the beacons in the game. I unlocked all the beacons in the game. I have the trophy for it. So these are all the beacons in the game. You'll basically go around trying to find these, because eventually you'll want to get to these. These are corrupted gates. These are the area bosses. What is going to happen basically is that you'll come upon one of these and you'll notice there's a gate right next to it. You'll find this, you'll rest at it, you'll cleanse it, and then once you cleanse it, this gate will open up. Once this gate opens up, you enter through it, and then once you enter through it, there's an entire dungeon that leads to the area boss, to which you will defeat that boss. After you defeat that boss, another beacon will rise up in the boss arena. You will enter that, and there's a surprise in there waiting for you. And that surprise in there waiting for you is what the basic goal of the game is. There are 6 area bosses, 3 in the north, 3 in the south, and then there is a final dungeon at the end of the game once you have completed the north and the south portions of the map. After that, there are dungeons. These are, I don't know if these are all the dungeons in the game. They're probably not, but this is a good amount of dungeons that are in the game. Another thing to note in this game is that when you complete a dungeon, it isn't automatically registered as complete. You have to hover over that specific dungeon, and you have to click in your right stick or R3 to manually set it to complete or incomplete, right? So you have to do that yourself. You're basically filling your map out along the way as you're journeying and going into these dungeons and stuff like that. But you will go in here, and these are just like around the map. These are not the ones that are in the specific beacons. Each one of the beacons has a cleanse beacon dungeon that you'll probably have to go through as well, um, in order to cleanse it properly, basically. But there are just like, other than that, you'll just go around and you'll just be like exploring, right? There's lots in this world to explore. As you can see, I'm going to turn all these things on, but I don't need bone gates necessarily. But you'll go and you'll find dungeons and stuff like this, and there might be most of the time there'll be like tar stones in there. There'll be extra gloom. There'll be gold and stuff in there that you need. There's 2 different currencies in this game. You'll come across these corrupted statues, which you'll activate, and then you'll begin a trial. The trial is kind of like a mini wave defense type of thing that you'll go through, where you have to fight enemies in a confined space. And then once you defeat all the enemies in the wave defense, you'll go back to the statue, and it gives you something, usually a tar stone or something to that effect. But yeah, you'll just go around and you'll explore, and there's a lot in this world to explore. This world is very beautiful. Even though the atmosphere is kind of grim and kind of dark and foreboding, there's a beauty to it. And it's really worth getting to know and experiencing for yourself, really. Lots of different biomes, while you have things like this where it's very green and very lush forests and things like that. You also have places like this that are kind of worn down, rugged, broken ruins and castles and stuff like that. Then you'll also have places like this, which are kind of ethereal in nature, white limestone and stuff like that, where it's kind of hard to describe. You just kind of have to go there, right? But it's just a very different kind of feeling. Then you have places like this place up here called the Sanguine Caverns, where it's all kind of this bleak, dark cave that has, or rather bleak, open cave that has like stalagmites and tights all over it, and there's blood everywhere, and there's specific kinds of enemies that are only there that are really creepy looking and stuff. There are a lot of very interesting biomes in this world, and it's very worth going around and trying to explore and experience all of it, right? So yeah, with all that being said, I will just kind of give you my final takes on the game, right? I like this game. I spent about 38 hours exploring every nook and cranny that I could. I definitely didn't find all the secrets. There's still one specific thing I'm looking for, but I like this game. It's a very good game. It's very good at what it does. It sticks to its strength. It's unapologetic about its difficulty or lack thereof if you decide to use the Slayer seal. Its world is beautiful. Its combat is weighty and precise, or intentional, I should say. You really feel the weight of the weapon in your hand when you're swinging it. The bosses are very memorable, very creative art design and characters design around the different kinds of bosses and stuff. And like I said before, the atmosphere, while seeming bleak and demure and grim and foreboding and things like this, there's a beauty to it. And it's a really atmospheric type of place that you can immerse yourself into and really feel like you're a part of, in a way, right? So with all that being said, I would absolutely recommend this game. Those are kind of the base idea of what's going on here in the game, and I would recommend it absolutely. For $50, this is not a hard sell at all. I definitely think that you can get 20 to 40 hours out of your first playthrough if you wanted to. In subsequent playthroughs, if you enjoyed it, there are ways to make that harder or easier if that's your kind of thing. There's replayability value to this game, absolutely, at least for a few times, right? It depends on how much you like the game. It varies between person to person, but there is definitely replayability value to this game, and that just adds on to what I was saying earlier. I would recommend the game for sure. So With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for watching. I hope you had fun. I hope it was informative. And I hope I influenced your purchasing decision in some way, whether you decided to buy it or not to buy it. I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.